In our last episode, we drew a clear line between education and schooling. Today, we're going to ask a harder question. What was school built to do, and why does that design no longer serve the world we live in? Because here's the truth. Schooling is not neutral. School is not broken by accident. It was designed, and every design reflects purpose. It reflects priorities, and it reflects power. School is performing exactly the way it was built to perform. The problem is the world that design served no longer exists. Welcome to Education, Power, and Social Change. I am your host, Dr. Chewachong Godwill Mih. First, let's discuss school as a social technology. Let's begin with a simple idea. School is a technology, not digital technology, but social technology. It was invented, developed, and scaled to solve specific problems for society. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, societies were transforming, rapidly industrializing, urbanizing, centralizing power, and expanding bureaucratic states. Governments and industries needed people who were literate enough to be able to read instructions, numerate enough to calculate, punctual enough to follow schedules, compliant enough to obey authority. So, schooling developed a structure that looks very familiar. Bells, timetables, age-based groupings, standardized curriculum, examinations, ranking and sorting. This wasn't random. Schools mirrored factories and administrative offices because they were preparing people to work in these factories and administrative offices. And let's be clear, this system did achieve real things. It expanded basic literacy. It brought many groups for the first time into formal learning. It prepared millions for industrial economies. But embedded inside this design was a deep assumption. The purpose of school is not to cultivate human flourishing. The purpose of school is to produce efficient, productive, governable populations. That was the mission. And for that era, it worked. Yes, it worked for that area, and perfectly so. Now, let's discuss school as a tool of social order. School was built to do something else. Shape behavior and social identity. School taught people who had authority and who didn't, who should obey and who should be obeyed, what knowledge counted, whose history mattered and whose did not. It taught people what success looked like. Therefore, school sorted people quietly into categories: academic versus non-academic, gifted versus average or struggling, college-bound versus working class or worker class. And these labels often mapped onto race, they're mapped onto class, gender, language, and if you want, even regions. So schooling didn't just prepare individuals for work. It reproduced social order. It normalized inequality while disguising as a merit. If you succeeded, the story went, you earned it. If you didn't, the story went, you simply weren't capable. The system rarely, if at all, asked whether the structure itself was fair or whether it was measuring the right things at all. Now let's discuss why this design no longer works. Fast forward to today. The world is no longer industrialized. It is digital, it is networked, it is creative, it is rapidly changing, and above all, it is deeply complex. And here is the crisis. We are still using a 19th century schooling system to prepare people for a 21st century world. The system which we are using today still rewards memorization over meaning. It rewards compliance over creativity, performance over curiosity, standardization over humanity. But today's world needs something else. We need critical thinkers. We need ethical leaders. We need adaptable learners. We need people who can collaborate, question, and innovate. We need people who are able and ready to navigate uncertainty. So, and unfortunately so, many students learn to fear mistakes. They wait for instructions. They try to perform instead of trying to explore. Teachers too are trapped in this dilemma. They are pressured to hit metrics rather than mature minds. So schooling continues to function, but its functions no longer match our needs. Instead, many students learn to fear mistakes, to wait for instructions, to perform, rather than to explore. Teachers, on their part, are trapped. They are pressured to hit metrics rather than to nurture minds. So schooling continues to function, but its functions no longer match our needs. It is a system which is basically optimized for order, for efficiency, for predictability. But the world now demands wisdom. The world demands flexibility. The world demands imagination. And when the gap widens between what school does and what society needs, people suffer. So, let's look at the human cost. Here is the real tragedy. When school defines success so narrowly, millions of people internalize unnecessarily failure. They begin to believe, I'm not smart, I'm not academic, I'm not capable, when in reality, many were simply not compatible with a system built for another era. What we are also seeing is burnout, anxiety, disengagement, loss of curiosity, workers who are unprepared, completely unprepared for complexity. Citizens are struggling to think critically about media, about power, and about the truth. And then we ask, why are people not learning? Why are people unprepared? The answer is uncomfortable. Because the system is still doing what it was built to do. The world, however, has changed. The world has evolved, but our system of education has not. So now that we understand, so what? What now? What should we do? If schooling was built for industrial order, then reclaiming education means building for human development. That means asking different questions. Not how do we standardize learning, but how do we cultivate thinkers, creators, builders, and compassionate citizens? Not how do we rank students, but how do we help every learner discover and grow in their unique strength? And equally, not how do we enforce compliance, but how do we build societies capable of questioning power responsibly? These are structural questions. There are also political questions, ethical questions, and these questions will shape the future of the world. Thank you for being part of this conversation. If today's episode resonated, share it. If it unsettled or challenged you, sit with it. In our next episode, we will reflect on the topic credentials over competence, when paper became more valuable than learning. And until next time, keep questioning what you've been taught and keep learning beyond the walls.